Hey, it's Aaron here. I'm so glad you've joined me. This is a series, and our topic is called Difficult Conversations. This is episode 2. And today we're going to be talking about this concept, which is about what happens to your brain, like on a brain level, when you get into a difficult conversation. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but when someone basically threatens a strongly held belief that you have, it can actually trigger the same response in your body as if someone let a lion into the room. Isn't that crazy? I mean, can you imagine if this back door opened up and a lion came in? My heart would start racing. I might start getting sweaty. I might start to get aggressive. But the point is that when someone attacks your belief or a strongly held belief that you have, it can put you in this position where you begin to feel like you are in survival mode. And so this can be a challenge for you, because if you go into a difficult conversation and you don't plan ahead for what's going to happen, you can go into a place where you get more aggressive, where you basically begin to say things or do things that you wouldn't normally expect yourself to do, because essentially you're in survival mode. And the reason why we do that is because there's a part of our brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala serves a certain purpose in the brain. Now, I should say, of course, I'm not a brain expert, but I am someone who pays attention to some of the brain science. And this particular part of the brain, the amygdala, does something very specific that ties directly to these moments where when someone attacks a strongly held belief or an idea that you have, it affects you a certain way because of the amygdala. So here's what the amygdala does. On the front part of your brain, this front part, it's called the prefrontal cortex, and it's the forward-thinking planning part of your brain. Now, there's the back part of your brain. It's the lower part of your brain. They call it the reptilian part of your brain. That reptilian part of your brain is the reactive part of your brain. Now, the amygdala kind of sits between these two zones of your forward-thinking planning and your reactive part of your brain. So it's right here in the middle. And what the amygdala is basically it is like a threat detector. And so the amygdala sits in between, and there's like a neural highway between your prefrontal cortex, forward-thinking and planning, and the reptilian part of your brain, which is the reactive part of your brain, the survival mode part of your brain. So the amygdala sits in the middle, and as information is coming in, it's detecting those threats, and it's really trying to validate the threats. Are these threats real? Could this really hurt me? Now, before you'd say, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, in fact, that's not actually true, because when people's words get spoken, it can trigger the amygdala to validate the threat. And what the amygdala essentially does is imagine it like blowing up the highway or blowing up the pathway between your forward-thinking planning part and your reactive part. And when the amygdala detects a threat and it blows up the ability for you to forward think and plan, and it disconnects, basically what happens is your brain reverts back to the reactionary side or the survival mode part of your brain. Now, this is really important, and you need to pay attention here, because they call this the amygdala hijack, by the way. When your amygdala perceives something as a threat and it blows up that bridge to the forward-thinking planning part of your brain, we lose some really important things. We lose things like compassion, emotional balance, response flexibility. We lose empathy. We lose connection to our self-knowing awareness, and we lose our ability to control or modulate our fear response. So can you imagine if you're going to have a really difficult conversation and someone says something and it triggers your amygdala to blow up that bridge, it validates the threat. You go into a part of your brain where you're no longer forward thinking and planning. You are just reacting. You're no longer responding. And so you've seen this with kids, by the way, when kids get upset and then they lose their cool, and then you're no longer talking to a reasonable person. You're just talking to someone who's just reacting. And what you've got to do is you've got to give that person time and space to calm down, to take a deep breath, so that they can get into a place where they can then reactivate their prefrontal cortex. And so that's the thing that I want you to be aware of as you engage in these difficult conversations is don't lose sight of the fact that if people attack your beliefs or strongly held beliefs, it can cause a reaction in you, in your body, and in your brain that literally cause you to basically stop thinking. You're just all reaction. And generally, we're not very productive in that state. So here's a quick 1, 2, 3 for how you can help prevent the amygdala hijack from happening to you so that you don't get into a reactive state instead of a forward-thinking planning state. Number 1, control your breathing. Take some deep breaths. Make sure you breathe through your nose. Box breathing is a really powerful thing that you can do. In for 4 seconds through your nose. Hold for 4 seconds. Out for 4 seconds. Then leave it empty for 4 seconds and then breathe it in. And you keep doing that. I say it's box breathing because it's breathe in, breathe out, hold, breathe in. And so you keep doing this box. And as you do it, it oxygenates your blood and it helps you to keep your prefrontal cortex on. So that's one of the number 1 things you can do. The second thing you can do is you need to do the pre-work before you go into the meeting or into the hard conversation to remind yourself of who you are and what your goal is. Is your goal just to fight? Because, well, then just forget it. You're not going to accomplish anything. But if your goal is to get heard, then you want to do the work to remind yourself of who you are, to come from a place of positivity and clarity, know what you want, and then to speak honestly, truthfully, and take your time. And remember, this is number 3, you're not responsible for how the other person responds. You are responsible for you. And so if you do the work to know who you are, to practice deep breathing so you can stay strong, you can have a more powerful conversation, and that difficult conversation could turn into a powerful one for you that sets you up.